Okay, so I have with us here today Julie Andersen from Plastic Oceans. How are you, Julie?
Very good. Great to be here, Christy.
I'm so happy to have you here and to share the very important work that you're doing with Plastic Oceans. So to start, let's talk about how this nonprofit was created. So Plastic Oceans International is a nonprofit organization with a goal to end plastic pollution and to foster sustainable communities worldwide. Can you tell us what initially inspired the creation of this organization?
Well, we really grew from the film A Plastic Ocean. It's a full documentary you can find on Netflix. We used that and we gained the rights for outreach, the distribution rights globally, and we really grew from that. But what brought me to the film was through the director, Craig Leeson. I know him from Hong Kong. I was living in Hong Kong at the time, and it's also captured in the film. In 2012, I was living in Hong Kong, and there was a container ship with the name Sinopec, which is the largest Chinese oil company, traveling down, and it was in a typhoon and all of its contents spilled. Multiple containers, 150 tons of pre-production plastic pellets. So they look like small white fish eggs, and they come in different colors, but these ones in particular were white, and they're small little beads, and 150 tons of these spilled into the ocean. And many of them washed up on the shorelines of Hong Kong, making the shorelines look like it had snowed. And that's not accounting. That was only a small percentage of them. Most of them just remain in the ocean to this day. When the container ship righted itself and sailed off, I thought, oh, they'll come back and they'll clean up like it's an oil spill. And it was then in 2012 that I learned that once oil is converted into plastic, it's considered non-hazardous and therefore not their responsibility to clean up. And they're not accountable for whatever happens to it. And that's why there is so much waste. To me, this was shocking. And I thought, how can it's such a huge factor and a huge omission in how we protect our planet, let alone, subsequently, I then learned how it affects humans and animal life and has a much larger impact. But incredibly, I saw the Hong Kong, the local community come together via a Facebook post. Somebody put on and said, we need local citizens to come out. And there was a call to action, and having everyone come up with makeshift devices, kitchen sieves, homemade devices, and just start cleaning up the beaches to do what they could. The number of people that came about raised the attention of not only the government to get involved and start putting some accountabilities in, working towards policy changes, but it also puts pressure on Sinopec to at least come back and at least send some of their employees to try to clean up. It was just a start, but to me, that is where action comes from. It comes from locals, it comes from awareness building, and it's one step at a time. That was the idea. I was like, this needs to go out, and that message needs to go out, and this global problem needs to really expand. And then as far as Plastic Oceans and how we work with communities, and that is, how do we foster that kind of local action and really start to see the action that starts to have that ripple effect bottom up, rather than just waiting for that. Let's just wait for the big companies and wait for all the countries to come on board. And that's why we foster local sustainable communities to end plastic pollution.
Wow. That is just a wild story to know that even happens. Number one, right? That it's just something like that happens and it's left for, without any cleanup or any responsibility taken. But I also love that it really was like a community effort, and that all of that inspired you to move forward with action. So you say that you operate from the belief that you can and must act locally, like you just mentioned, in order to create change globally. And you do so through 4 pillars of activity: education, activism, advocacy, and science. Can you tell us more about these 4 pillars and why you feel it's most important to act locally in order to see global change?
I think change is no different. It requires the same sort of level of commitment as any change in our life. And it starts with schools and how we learn about each other, about basic systems in place, and the science that continues to come out and support things. So it is through science and research-based facts that we learn from, and they constantly are evolving, and we constantly need to, or they're constantly coming out with new information, and we need to evolve with that. And that's why we think that science is so important, educating ourselves, not to be static, but we are constantly growing and learning about other systems. The world grows, we learn more about how the environment, how we interact with the environment. So education plays a huge role in just awareness building, so that we can make better choices. This is not to say that there's an end all be all and we've found the solution and everybody should follow our way, but it is working to develop in the ways that we can and meeting people where they are, because no individuals alike, but no community is alike, even in the systems that support it. And when I say systems, financial infrastructure, recycling capabilities, cultural capabilities of what their diet is and how they telling people to become vegan tomorrow is not easy. It's especially if it's built into your culture. And so a lot of these that's where we advocate for recognition of those changes, those community differences. We get people involved where they are. We activate them to, whether it is cleanups or meeting up with support groups or influencers within those communities. That's the activism that we want to see and we promote. And we continuously put out as much information as we can and educate on as much as the upcoming or up-to-date information is available. And why we work locally, it is to meet people where they are. At the end of the day, we don't have a globalized system of unity of culture and economics and social infrastructures. And I use that social infrastructures being, in the case of plastic, it is about waste management. Waste management isn't equal in the sense that not everybody has recycling bins or people to come and pick them up and take them to a facility that has the wide range of recycling capabilities. Even here in the US, it's shocking how different each community is within the US, how some cities have very drinkable water, some cities do not have drinkable water, and they are dependent on plastic water bottles. I live in Los Angeles, and I find it amazing that a 20-minute drive in any direction changes how our recycling is picked up or our waste is managed.
It's amazing to me that as you're talking about that, I'm thinking, I just learned recently, and I was kind of devastated about it, that I forget what the number is, but the percentage of recycled goods that don't actually get recycled because they don't meet the requirements, or, like you said, in certain areas, there just isn't the structure to support the ability to recycle it properly. And I don't know. I think that sometimes a lot of us are very just unaware of what's going on. I know growing up, recycling was such a major theme in my community. There was lots of education and advocacy around it, so we were all on board. But then somewhere over the years, it kind of became just you assumed that everybody was recycling, and you assumed that everything was recyclable that you put in a recycling can, or it's just really fascinating to me, and I'm glad you break it down like that, to understand that it's just not this. We do not have it really figured out yet.
Not at all. And I always say that, such a perfect example is what we've done and where our problems like this have reached this massive global scale, is that we've done an incredible job globalizing the production and delivery of goods. Amazon, amazing. Yeah. The fact that any of us can order literally anything and almost get it same day is shocking. We've globalized the system, making it seem like, oh wow, we can send our goods everywhere. But what's not created is, once they're there, what happens to them at the end? Yes. And what's not globalized and equal is how we manage that end of life of our waste. And that's what is becoming so complicated, in terms of separating the responsibility and understanding that the consumer has, and then the understanding and capabilities that the producer has. And at some point, the producers keep saying, oh, recycle, recycle, and consumers have done their part. But at some point, if the producers are making now products that are trickier and trickier, more difficult to recycle, the burden cannot be on the consumer. And that's when our other pillar is advocacy. And that's when we advocate for and fight for policies to be put in place so that producers are making products that can be recycled and can be recycled in that area, in the location that they are selling those goods. So one of the things that we've done at Plastic Oceans, we've been supporting a Clean Seas Coalition, supporting laws here in California, and it's part of a circular economy package that only passed a few weeks ago. And a couple of those policies were, one, on recycling, when it says it can be recycled, if you buy a product and it has the chasing arrows, that it can actually be recycled within California. You can't sell, and on top of that, the second law was California can't say that it's recycling if it really is shipping it over to Asia, or if it's shipping the recycled goods over to Africa, and say, oh, we've met our recycling quota. Definition of recycling should be, it can be recycled in your area, in California in this case. It can be recycled in California, and it's not being shipped, and the responsibility isn't passed on. And so it's advocating in those senses of like, where does the responsibility lie? Where are the gaps of this in the system where that's breaking down the system? Like, the concept of recycling is good, but there's clearly gaps where it's breaking, and it's really educating and putting the responsibility on those that can really manage it.
That's incredible. Just as you explained the fact that there's gaps, that makes a whole lot of sense in terms of why it's not entirely working, right? Like, when you say, like, we are able to produce, we've mastered the art of producing things and getting things into the hands of the consumer, but that we haven't exactly mastered the what happens on the other side. I think that's why, and you just really explained that so well. It's because there's these gaps. And so what you're doing, this work is so important because you're helping to fill those gaps, bridge those gaps, and advocate for it to be done in the correct way. So that's fantastic. So through supportive programs aligned with these pillars that you just mentioned and driven by embracing circular economy, your mission is to inspire and cite action that can lead to changes in consumer behavior, corporate practices, and public policy. So we just discussed how all of that collectively can lead to a reduction in plastic pollution. Essentially, if we are able to get those wheels in motion and bridge those gaps, that we'll be able to meet that end result. And Plastic Oceans International also produces, distributes, and supports film and other digital content focusing on the planet's health and conservation, and promoting a global movement to rethink plastic. Can you tell us more about those projects, partnerships, and initiatives?
So again, going back to what I do call gaps and barriers that prevent us from reducing plastic pollution or even reducing the consumption of plastic. There's a lot of communities that share those type of disparities. And an obvious one, or an easy one I think we use, is water bottles. Plastic water bottles, at some point, if we continuously consume these, it does become a problem, because we don't have a way to manage all the recycled plastic water bottles. We don't have this continuous circularity of it. And I'll go back to the circular economy of how we do those things. But in their communities, we can go and we can say, hey, don't use water bottles. You refill, use a glass, use a cup, refill. But if those communities don't have access to drinkable water, then that is a barrier. Then they are dependent on continuously using plastic water bottles. So it is highlighting, why is it that they don't have access to clean water? And a recent film that we just announced last week is the Erie situation. And it really is focused on the Great Lakes and how there is this growth in algae blooms more and more. They're getting worse. And this is reflected across the world. There's been a 65% increase in algae blooms. And you think, well, what's this have to do with plastic pollution? The question is, but it's affecting the potable water, the fresh water sources that we have that do provide fresh water and potable water if it's at a level that we can filter. And it's only through this film that we started to look in, well, what is causing the algae blooms, and where along the system is there that gap? And it turns out it is big agriculture in terms of runoff. Where does all of our runoff water go after it rains? What chemicals are being dumped into those water sources? And that then becomes the question of where can we advocate in terms of preventing chemical runoff into our drinkable water sources that then will lead to less potable water sources, which then leads to this demand in plastic water bottles. So it really is, we use film to really do the deeper investigation of where the deeper problem is, rather than just fixing this superficial problem of, oh, we just need to stop using water bottles, which is important, but why is our dependency on there? Let's dig a little deeper and find some of the core sources that are affecting a broader range of our problems.
Wow, it's really important work that you're doing. And so you recently hosted an event called the Trees and Seas Festival, which was a diverse celebration that united ocean and forest conservation worldwide. Can you tell us more about that event and its global impact?
And here it goes back to our Trees and Seas is really a festival that brings our Blue communities together. Our Blue Communities Initiative is really working with local communities. And by that, we mean we work with other organizations that are on the ground that understand their cultures, the socioeconomic barriers, the ecosystems that are present. And they have a deeper understanding of their barriers. They have an understanding of what their problems are, and they're able to target those issues, whether it be not enough mangroves, like a depletion of mangroves, or it's access to goods. Maybe people simply don't have access to alternative products like a water bottle or bags or certain types of food that's not completely wrapped in packaging. So even providing access. So each group, organization, Blue community is focused on different areas of sustainability that ultimately is the barrier to reducing plastic pollution. We bring all of our communities together through this festival and really showing that we are more interconnected than not. And it is not just an ocean conservation issue that we're tackling. This is a global, we're trying to protect the planet, and it is land and sea. And that's why we brought Trees and Seas together to see the importance of planting trees and planting and cleanups, webinars, even cultural activities, music and things like that is what we've brought together. And what's been incredible, this past year was the first Trees and Seas Festival that we held, and we planted over 100,000 trees in a week. We've had over 100 beach cleanups. We had over 50 webinars, workshops globally. And what it shows you is the collective effort really is capable of bringing about amazing impact if you collectively work together. And that's really what we're trying to highlight, and really highlight these organizations, these smaller organizations that tend to just work endlessly and it always feels like a drop in the bucket, but collectively it becomes a significant pool.
That's amazing. And you also have an educational guide called Earth's Echo for parents and teachers to help educate children about plastic pollution and the basics of sustainability. Can you tell us more about that and how listeners can access this guide?
So all of our films can be found at plasticoceans.org/films. We have all of our films that are on there, and you can watch them there or access them. And it shows you how to access them. And we do have discussion guides for each one, or education guides for deeper purposes. This film that you're referring to, Earth's Echo, was created for kids 5 to 13 years old. And we created an educational packet that really works for, that is guided for kids. It's not a huge curriculum, so the teachers don't have to feel that they have to go and educate themselves for weeks on end. Parents can download this and work with their kids on it. Kids can download it themselves. They can find it also directly on the website. It's free, and we've had amazing sponsors that have allowed us to be able to provide it for free. It's also in Spanish, and we do make everything bilingual in Spanish and English. And this one actually is dubbed in Spanish, and it's been just it's amazing to work with youth because of the fact that they are just, they're not confined, and so their imaginations are a lot bigger. They see problem solving is a lot easier. They don't feel like, well, they're not exhausted by, what if. And so it's been incredible to be able to offer this, and we highly recommend everybody, to check it out, download it, see it, check it out for free.
Absolutely. And I will be sure to put in the show notes links to all of this as well, so that everybody can easily access it. And I'm probably going to go check it out as soon as we get off and download it for my own kids. Perfect. I think that's awesome. So on this podcast, we often discuss the topic of compassion. Would you mind sharing with us your own personal definition of compassion and how you think it best relates to the work that you do?
I think compassion, honestly, First, I'm going to go to sustainability. Like, we foster sustainable communities, and sustainability is like a feature of a system. It's a feature of how we interact with each other. And sustainability is how we connect with the environment, how we connect with each other as people, how we connect with other living creatures. Fundamentally to sustainability is compassion. You cannot reach sustainability without caring about those that impact us as well as we impact them. And that goes for the environment, other people, other animals, and it is the core that we say is that it's compassion. Without caring, without compassion, we cannot start to change or start to improve our lives or those of others, because we are just so codependent on each other. And compassion is like the fundamental. And I don't know if you can teach that, but it is something where I know that you can do in a local setting, like within our local communities, whether it's our families or our neighborhoods. It's easier to care and have compassion with those that we can see and understand. Just start with our families. We have that compassion, and from there, and we can fix those communities, and that ripple effect eventually you see it on a global level.
Yeah, I think it's very clear that is such a necessary thread in your work that you're doing, because you focus so much on that local component being the road to a larger impact, that compassion is just so necessary. And so I love that definition. Thank you for sharing that. You are a small but mighty organization, and you say that volunteers are truly the backbone of your global organization. So can you tell us more about how anyone listening could possibly volunteer and help support your mission?
We are looking for volunteers at all levels. I mean, it could be a one-time thing, if it's even just screening one of our films at your home with friends, or even at your church, or whatever, through your child's school. Organizing a screening is an easy way to just start spreading information, as well as engaging in a conversation. We're also looking for local cleanups and tree plantings and different local activities that they can get involved in. You can find ways to submit your information on our website. There is a volunteer form that you can fill out. And there are many organizations, as our Blue communities continue to grow, they can get involved with other organizations that we work with, and which also is extremely helpful.
That's wonderful. So again, I will put links to that in the show notes so everyone can find that. But can you also lastly tell us where we could go directly to donate and how we can best follow along with your ongoing mission?
plasticoceans.org. And if you go to plasticoceans.org/donate, you can see where our different initiatives are. We always have, this is the end of the year of giving here, and but we're always need support for all of our different programs, whether it's certain film projects, different communities, in specific communities that they may want to support, or just in general our operations of the different initiatives that we have.
Wonderful. And are you also on Instagram as well?
We are on Instagram at Plastic Oceans.
Perfect.
And we Facebook Plastic Oceans. So and plasticoceans.org. So you can definitely find all of us at some point at Plastic Oceans.
That's great. That's great. I was going to say, because I found you on Instagram, and I find that sometimes that's a really great way for people to get, just an insight to what it is that you do. By kind of following along there. And you have so much great information there, and also in the link in your bio, which I believe takes you primarily to your website, but has a lot of information. And I just think that the work that you and your team are doing is incredibly inspiring. And thank you for what you're doing, because not all of us can focus so heavily as you are, but the fact that you are allows the rest of us to feel inspired to do our part as well. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I mean, these are so critical in terms of spreading the information and just getting people aware and what they can do.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you.